Imagine finding out your husband's stressful, exhaustingly busy business trip was actually a five-star romantic getaway with his mistress. Now, imagine walking into your garage, looking at his most prized possession on planet Earth, a flawless, fully restored vintage car, and deciding to sell it for a single, crumpled $1 bill, just to pay for the divorce lawyer who's going to ruin his life. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. And honestly, I don't regret a single second of it. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and a level of petty revenge that is honestly kind of inspiring. If you've ever been lied to, taken for granted, or played for a fool by someone you gave your best years to, grab a snack and settle in. Because by the end of this video, you are going to be taking notes. Let me take you back to where this all started. And my husband, let's call him David, and I had been married for 6 years. We had what you'd probably call a comfortable marriage. You know the type, right? We didn't have screaming matches in the driveway, but we didn't exactly have fireworks anymore either. It was just routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, ask what's for dinner, watch 3 episodes of whatever is trending on Netflix, sleep, and repeat until you die. It felt safe, boring, but safe. But David had one true passion in life, and spoiler alert, it absolutely wasn't me. It was his 1968 Ford Mustang. He bought it as a total rust bucket about 2 years into our marriage. I'm talking a hunk of junk that looked like it had been sitting at the bottom of a lake. But he spent thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars completely restoring it. He loved this car more than he loved his own mother, and he wouldn't even let me eat a French fry within a 10-foot radius of the vehicle. Every single weekend, while I was inside doing laundry, scrubbing the baseboards, and keeping our actual lives together, David was out in the garage, polishing the chrome, revving the engine, cleaning the air vents with a literal Q-tip. He treated that hunk of metal like absolute royalty. I didn't mind at first. Everyone needs a hobby to decompress, right? I figured it kept him out of trouble. But around year 5 of our marriage, things started to shift. David got a pretty major promotion at his logistics firm, and suddenly his schedule became entirely unpredictable. He was working late almost every night, going into the office on weekends. He started changing his phone passwords, guarding his screen like it held nuclear launch codes. And then came the classic, undefeated red flag of all time. He started wearing a new, insanely expensive cologne. The kind that smells like cedarwood, money, and secrets. Now, I want to pause right here for a second, because I know someone listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. Have you ever noticed how, when we're deeply entrenched in a relationship, we force ourselves to ignore the glaringly obvious signs of cheating? It's like our brains put up bright yellow caution tape, and our hearts just duck right under it. We tell ourselves we're just being paranoid. We blame it on stress. And we don't want to be that crazy, jealous spouse checking phone bills at 2 a.m. So, I ignored my gut. Even when he came into the kitchen one Tuesday evening and announced he had a sudden 4-day mandatory business trip to Miami. But here's the beautiful thing about liars. They always, eventually, get sloppy. The night before his flight, David was rushing around the bedroom packing his suitcase. He was so excited, practically buzzing with energy, claiming it was because this trip could mean a massive bonus for us. He kissed my forehead, told me he'd miss me, and drove off to the airport at 5 in the morning. About 3 hours later, I was cleaning up the living room, gathering some old magazines, when I heard a very faint ding. It wasn't my phone. It was an old iPad we kept shoved in the bottom drawer of the coffee table. David hadn't used it in literally months. But because he was technically still logged into his Apple ID on it, the devices were synced. My heart completely stopped. You know that feeling when your stomach just drops out of your body? Like you thought there was one more step at the bottom of the stairs, and you just fall into total nothingness? That was me. I pulled the iPad out of the drawer. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely swipe to unlock the screen. And there it was, an entire, very ongoing text thread with a contact saved as Mike from accounting, except Mike from accounting was sending him selfies in a string bikini. Mike from accounting was talking about couples massages and room service. Mike from accounting was a 24-year-old girl named Chloe. I sat there reading months of messages. They were laughing about how clueless I was. They were planning dinners at restaurants David told me were too expensive for our anniversary. And he had even bought her a necklace using cash so I wouldn't see it on the bank statement. I spent the next 2 hours curled up crying on the kitchen floor. I grieved the marriage. I grieved the life I thought we were building. I felt humiliated, stupid, and so incredibly small. I thought about calling him, screaming at him through the phone, demanding he get on the next flight home. But then, the tears just stopped, and a very different emotion took over. Anger is a funny thing. When it's raw, it's chaotic and messy. But when it goes cold, it becomes a superpower. I realized I didn't want to just confront him. Confronting him would give him the chance to gaslight me, to beg for forgiveness, or worse, to make up some pathetic excuse to make me look like the bad guy. I didn't want an apology. Apologies don't pay the rent. I wanted an exit strategy. I spent the rest of the day meticulously gathering evidence. I screenshotted every text, every photo, and every hotel confirmation, and emailed them all to a secure brand new email account he knew nothing about. Then, I started looking for a divorce lawyer. I didn't just want any lawyer. I didn't want a mediator. I wanted a shark. I asked around, through a friend of a friend, and found a woman named Brenda. Her reputation was terrifying in the best way possible. She was the lawyer you hired when you wanted to leave your ex with nothing but the clothes on their back and a lingering sense of eternal regret. I begged her assistant for an emergency consultation and got into Brenda's office the next morning. I showed her the iPad. I told her the whole story, start to finish. She sat behind her massive mahogany desk, looked at me over her glasses, and smiled a smile that chilled my blood. "I can absolutely destroy him," she said casually, and as if she were ordering a latte. "But my retainer is $10,000 up front." My heart sank into my shoes. David controlled most of our heavy finances. I had a small personal savings account, but nothing even close to 10 grand. I told Brenda I couldn't afford her, and I felt that familiar wave of defeat washing over me. As I stood up to leave, I glanced around her office. Her shelves were lined with die-cast models of vintage cars. Framed photos of classic car shows covered the walls behind her desk. "You like classic cars?" I asked. Brenda sighed, leaning back in her leather chair. "Love them. I've been trying to find a solid restoration project for years, but everything on the market right now is either rusted out beyond repair or horribly overpriced." I slowly sat back down in my chair. A devious, brilliant, legally bulletproof plan was forming in my mind. "Brenda," I said slowly, testing the waters, "how would you like a fully restored cherry red 1968 Ford Mustang?" Now you're probably listening to this thinking, "Wait! Yeah, stop right there. You can't just sell your husband's car. That's theft. That's illegal." And usually, you would be 100% right. But remember when I said David was sloppy? Well, he wasn't just sloppy with his cheating. 3 years ago, David got into a minor legal scuffle regarding some unpaid business debts with a former partner. Panicking that his personal assets might be targeted in a lawsuit, he transferred the title of his beloved, prized Mustang entirely into my name. Legally, on paper, the state recognized me, and only me, as the sole owner of that car. He always meant to transfer it back once the lawsuit blew over. But because he spent all his free time polishing the chrome and texting his 24-year-old mistress, he never got around to it. I explained this little loophole to Brenda. I told her the car was sitting in my garage right now, polished, pristine, and entirely in my legal possession. Hey, Brenda's eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. What exactly are you proposing? I don't have $10,000, I said, leaning over her desk. But I do have a $50,000 classic car that legally belongs to me. I will sell you this car right now, today, to cover my legal fees. But to make it a legally binding contract, money actually has to exchange hands. Brenda didn't even blink. She opened her designer purse, pulled out her wallet, and slid a single $1 bill across the desk. Consider my retainer paid in full, she said. We drafted up the bill of sale right then and there. For $1 single, Brenda became the proud new owner of David's most prized possession. She didn't waste any time. She sent a flatbed tow truck to my house that exact same afternoon. Let me tell you, watching that massive tow truck back into my driveway was the most therapeutic experience of my entire life. I stood on the front porch, drinking a very large glass of wine, as the driver carefully loaded the Mustang onto the back. I waved goodbye as it disappeared down the street. The garage was completely empty, except for one thing. Right in the center of the clean, oil-stain-free floor, right where his precious Mustang used to sit, I placed a small folding card table. On top of it, I left a neatly stacked pile containing the printed divorce papers, a thick printout of the text messages with Mike from accounting, and the $1 bill Brenda had given me, perfectly framed in a cheap plastic picture frame. And then, the waiting game began. 2 days later, David's Uber pulled up to the house. He walked through the front door, deeply tanned, smelling like expensive sunscreen, and dragging his rolling suitcase. "Hey, babe, I'm home," he called out from the hallway. "Trip was exhausting. Ciao, but we closed the deal." I was sitting on the couch, calmly reading a book. I didn't even look up. "That's great, honey. Could you do me a favor and go grab my heavy coat from the garage? I think I left it out there." "Sure thing," he said cheerfully, totally oblivious. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then, I heard the sound of his suitcase hitting the hardwood floor. "Where is it?" He burst back into the living room, and his face completely drained of color. He looked like he had just seen a ghost, or worse, the ghost of his car. "Where is my car? Did someone steal my car? Call the police." I calmly marked my page and closed my book. "Nobody stole it, David. I sold it." You what?" He was hyperventilating now, clutching his chest. "You can't sell my car. Who did you sell it to? For how much?" "I sold it for $1, I said, my voice completely steady. "To my divorce lawyer, who, by the way, has already filed the paperwork. The details are on the table out there, along with your romantic itinerary with Chloe." I have never in my life seen a human being experience so many emotions in the span of 30 seconds. Confusion, denial, terror, and absolute soul-crushing despair all washed over his face at once. He immediately whipped out his phone and called the police, practically screaming that his crazy wife had stolen his property. But when the officers arrived 20 minutes later, I calmly invited them in, offered them water, and showed them the title history, along with the legally binding bill of sale. Because the car was solely in my name. The officers looked at David, shrugged, and told him there was absolutely nothing they could do. It was a civil matter. He tried to fight it in the divorce proceedings, of course. He tried to claim I sold marital property under market value. But remember, I hired Brenda. And Brenda didn't just have his car. She had him dead to rights. During discovery, she uncovered that he had been using joint marital funds to pay for Chloe's flights, her hotels, and her dinners. That's called dissipation of marital assets, and judges absolutely hate it. In the end, I kept the house. I kept my retirement. I got a very nice chunk of his savings to repay what he spent on his affair. And David? David had to move into a tiny, depressing one-bedroom apartment near the airport, and the absolute cherry on top? Because Chloe thought David was a wealthy hotshot who drove a vintage Mustang and took her on lavish, all-expenses-paid trips. She dumped him the exact second she realized half his paycheck was going to me, and he was now driving a beaten-up, squeaky 2004 Honda Civic. Sometimes revenge isn't about screaming, throwing plates, or keying someone's car in the middle of the night. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is purely administrative. It's quiet, it's entirely legal, and it costs exactly $1. So, what do you guys think? Did I take it too far? Or did David get exactly what he deserved for taking his wife and his car title for granted? Let me know down in the comments how you would have handled this situation. Have you ever caught a partner lying about a so-called business trip? I want to read your stories. And if you loved this petty revenge as much as I enjoyed sharing it, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Because trust me, the one I have lined up for next week, it makes this look like child's play. Stay smart, trust your gut, and I'll see you in the next video.